September 27, 1982, Mora Valley, New Mexico. New Mexico State Police Officer Herman Silva drives out to investigate the report of an abandoned vehicle. A local rancher called it in a week earlier, said the car had been sitting in the same spot for days. No sign of the owner, no explanation for why it was there. Silva pulls up to the location, an area along Route 3 in New Mexico near a small farming community called Holman. It's remote, very beautiful. The locals describe this stretch as the middle of nowhere. Silva finds the car exactly where the rancher said it would be. A 1979 Chevy Chevette, white, New Jersey license plates. The doors are locked. Personal belongings, however, are visible from the outside. There's no damage to the car, no signs of a struggle. Silva assumes it's a stolen vehicle. Someone probably ditched it out here where they thought they would just find it. He runs the plates, and it's registered to Ann Riffin of Montclair, New Jersey. Silva calls the Riffin residents to inform them their stolen car has been found. But the person on the other end of the line says, "None of our vehicles have been stolen." Silva reads back the license plate number and describes the car. Suddenly, the voice on the phone changes. "Ann. That's Ann's car. What happened to Ann?" And just like that, what Silva thought was a routine auto theft case becomes something far more mysterious. Because 33-year-old Ann Riffin, an intelligent, well-traveled woman from a wealthy New Jersey family, had vanished. Her car was found abandoned in the middle of nowhere 200 miles from where she'd been living. The doors were locked, a $50 bill and uncashed checks inside the car. Her paintings, her belongings, everything was still there, except for Ann. Now, over 40 years later, nobody knows what happened to her. Did she walk away, start a new life? Did she get lost in the wilderness and succumb to the elements? Or did something far more sinister happen along that desolate stretch of road? So today we're going to break down exactly what happened to Ann Riffin. We'll examine her complicated life, her mysterious trip to New Mexico, and the bizarre circumstances surrounding her disappearance. All right, let's get into today's story.
Ann Linda Riffin was born on May 8, 1949, in New Jersey. She was the second child of Irving and Babette Riffin, coming 3 years after her older sister Jane. The Riffins were well-to-do. Irving was a respected physician. Babette, called Babs by everyone who knew her, had graduated high school at 15 and was heavily involved in the community. They raised their daughters in Montclair, New Jersey, a wealthy suburban town in Essex County. The family was Jewish, devout, active in their local temple. Friends and family described Ann as quiet, thoughtful, intelligent, a little shy. Her older sister Jane was different, more driven, more competitive, more involved in school activities. Ann was introspective, creative. She spent much of her childhood drawing, painting, writing, collecting wildflowers. She loved beauty, loved nature, loved trying to capture it on the page. But there was always this comparison between the two sisters. In later interviews, Ann's parents would talk about Jane and Ann like they were opposites. An article in the Albuquerque Journal quoted Babs saying, "Jane was everything Ann was not, competitive, assertive, sophisticated." Babs pointed out that when Jane turned 12, there was a steady stream of boys dropping by the house. Ann never had any boyfriends as a teenager. It's hard to say whether this constant comparison affected Ann, whether it made her feel like she wasn't good enough, wasn't accomplished enough. Her father, Irving, was asked directly, "Do you think Ann was jealous of her sister?" His response, "I don't think it was overt. That's not exactly a no." Anne attended Montclair High School, where she actually did quite well. She was involved in tons of activities: student council, National Honor Society, yearbook editor, photography club. She graduated in 1967 and followed her sister to Wellesley College, a prestigious private women's school in Massachusetts. Jane had made Phi Beta Kappa, the oldest academic honor society in America. Anne didn't. She didn't perform poorly, but she was struggling to figure out who she was, what she wanted to do, what career path to follow. And then there was what was happening in the world. The Vietnam War was raging. College campuses had become hotbeds of protests and activism. Anne, described by her mother as too gentle, couldn't handle it. Babs later said, "Everybody was protesting in those days, bombing and burning. Anne was too gentle. She didn't understand it. She came into this world at the wrong time." Anne withdrew from Wellesley during what would have been her junior year. She moved to Marblehead, a coastal town in Massachusetts, and started working on a book about peace, about her desire to see the world come together. Curiously, she mailed the manuscript to Apple Records, the label founded by the Beatles, and they responded. They were interested. They invited Anne to England to finish the manuscript for publication. Anne went, spent time in England, but the book was never published. She came back to the States and moved back in with her parents in Montclair. Over the next several years, Anne bounced around. She led a youth hostel bicycling group to Williamsburg, Virginia, fell in love with the history there, decided she wanted to become a history teacher, enrolled at the College of William and Mary, majored in anthropology, graduated in 1974 at age 25, got hired to teach at a middle school in Williamsburg, but she only lasted 1 year. The school didn't invite her back. According to her family, Anne enjoyed the subject matter but struggled managing her students. Next, she taught at a private school run by an evangelical sect called the New Testament Church, and something changed. The more time Anne spent around her Christian friends, the more interested she became in Christianity. This upset her parents. They'd raised her Jewish, but they didn't say anything at first, because Anne seemed happier, more positive, until she started trying to convert them, quoting Bible passages at them, making comments about the Bible during temple services. Eventually, Anne left that teaching job, bounced between different positions in Williamsburg, worked as a bookkeeper for a real estate firm, worked as a private nurse for a couple from the church whose child had a terminal illness. When the child passed away, Anne was devastated. She left Williamsburg and moved back home to Montclair. By this point, her parents were getting frustrated. They felt like Anne was living a rudderless existence. Irving thought she was too old to be living at home. Babs thought Montclair wasn't a good place for Anne. Great if you're married, very bad if you're single. So Anne left again. This time she went to Israel. Describing herself as a Jewish Christian, she got hired as the editor of a scientific journal, learned Hebrew, wrote articles for the Jewish News back in New Jersey. A year later, she came home, started looking for work as a journalist. That didn't pan out. The tension between Anne and her parents kept building. Her sister Jane invited Anne to move in with her family, hoping a change of scenery might help. According to Jane, they got along well for the most part. Anne became close with her nieces, but there were clashes. Jane was frustrated with Anne's apparent lack of drive. She told the Albuquerque Journal, "Anne was not an easy person to live with." By the early 1980s, Anne was in her 30s, still floating, no solid job, no solid group of friends, no plans, and depression started creeping in. According to Anne's parents, the depression got bad, really bad. Babs said it got to a point where Anne wouldn't even get out of bed. She told the Journal, "Anne wouldn't get out of bed. I told her there were 9 million unemployed people in this country. I didn't think she would be one of them with her credentials." Anne's parents urged her to seek psychological counseling. She did. Part of the counselor's plan? Start charging Ann room and board. Make her feel like she was contributing. Give her motivation to find a job. Ann reportedly pleaded with them to wait until she had a job before charging her. They agreed, but they also pushed her to get moving. And then, in the spring of 1982, Ann made a decision. She packed a few items, climbed into her car, a white 1979 Chevy Chevette registered in her father's name, and drove away. No one in the family knew it at the time, but this would be the last time they ever saw her. When Ann drove away that spring afternoon, her parents thought she was going to Pennsylvania to visit friends. A week later, they got a postcard from Oklahoma. A few days after that, Ann called. She was in New Mexico. She'd been offered a job. She was planning to stay. According to Babs, they tried to be supportive. We were glad Ann was doing something. She'd been trying to find herself for a long time. We figured if she could last through this, she might be capable of making a new start. The family wasn't exactly surprised Ann had gone to New Mexico. Babs had visited the state as a teenager and told Ann how beautiful it was. It seemed like a place that might fit her. She loved mountains, spoke Spanish fluently, had an interest in art and nature. In early June 1982, Ann arrived in Ruidoso, a small village in Lincoln County with a population of about 5,000. She walked into a restaurant called Whispering Pines and applied for work. The owner, Ruth Ellis, was a little confused. Ann had an impressive resume, teaching experience, journalism experience, nursing experience. Ruth later said, "I wondered why she would want to do this, but then this is Ruidoso, and all sorts of people come through." On June 7, 1982, Ann started her first shift. She was paid $3.75 an hour. She cleaned pots, set tables, peeled potatoes, washed dishes. And according to Ruth, she seemed to enjoy it. She asked questions about every aspect of the business. She was curious, engaged, but she never talked about herself. Ruth said, "She asked about everything in the kitchen. Most people who work at restaurants don't ask. On the other hand, she never told anybody anything about herself." Ann worked alongside Joan Stokes, Ruth's sister. Joan was looking for a roommate. Ann was looking for a place to stay. They made an agreement. Ann moved into Joan's cabin, just 8 blocks from the restaurant. According to Joan, she and Ann got along well. But that may have been because they rarely saw each other. They worked opposite shifts. Joan described Ann as a homebody. She preferred painting, writing letters, and reading to going out and socializing. She was quiet, reserved, conservative. Ruth expanded on this, saying Ann was sort of the opposite of what you'd expect from someone working in a restaurant. Most people who work in restaurants are outgoing and flashy. Ann never tried to dress up or wear makeup. She was very conservative. She never dated either, and we had a lot of single men working here that summer. Ruth also noted that Ann seemed to struggle with humor. She'd tell people she didn't understand jokes. She seemed naive almost. Ruth said, "Ann had been all over the world, but you'd never have known it by talking with her. She could get lost driving from her cabin to the restaurant." Ann was exceedingly private. She shared almost no information about her past, about her current activities, and she'd surrounded herself with people who didn't ask questions. As Joan put it, "She was a very private person, and I am not a very nosy person." According to Joan, Ann didn't spend much money. She could only remember her buying a pair of shoes once. That made sense. Ann's mother later said she wasn't into money or material possessions. Almost never spent cash unless she had to. But here's the thing. When investigators later analyzed Ann's credit card records, they discovered she'd made at least 2 trips to Albuquerque, 180 miles northwest of Ruidoso. What she did there? Mystery. Jones said Ann never mentioned the trips, never gave details about where she went or who she might have been with. Ann called her parents every Sunday, but she didn't tell them much about what she was doing either. According to Babs, Ann seemed to enjoy New Mexico, but she started getting the feeling her daughter might be looking to move on again. At one point, Ann told her mother she wanted to come home. Her parents encouraged her to stay, stick it out, see what she could make of it. It was a decision they would later deeply regret. Early September 1982, Ann told her mother she was planning to take a trip. She wanted to visit relatives in Colorado Springs, 500 miles north of Ruidoso, cousins and an aunt. She wanted to celebrate Yom Kippur, which was set to begin on September 26th. She told her roommate Joan and her boss Ruth that she was going out of town, requested 2 weeks off. They granted it. On Sunday, September 12th, Ann packed some belongings into her car and drove away from the cabin. She never returned, and she never arrived in Colorado Springs. For the next 2 weeks, nobody saw her. Nobody heard from her. No missing persons report was filed. According to Babs, Ann was on vacation, so they didn't expect to hear from her. But on the morning of September 27th, 15 days after Ann left Ruidoso, Officer Herman Silva headed out to investigate that abandoned vehicle, and everything changed. Officer Silva found the car parked just off New Mexico Route 3 near Holman. It's a remote area, beautiful but unforgiving. The route from Ruidoso to Colorado Springs has several options, and while Route 3 can get you there, locals said it's the least likely option to take. Many wondered, did Ann get lost? Did she have some knowledge of this location? Did she want to paint the landscape and got lost in the wilderness? Nobody knows. The car was locked, personal belongings inside, no signs of damage, no signs of a struggle. Silva opened it up. The car was in good shape, full working order, still had a quarter tank of gas. Inside, clothes and personal belongings and luggage on the passenger seat, a $50 bill, uncashed checks totaling $222.13, several paintings Ann had done while in New Mexico, blank canvases, painting supplies. There was also a stack of letters Ann had received from friends she'd made in the New Testament church. Several letters included invitations for Ann to come back and join them. 2 things were missing: Ann's purse and her car keys. Investigators searched the area, brought in bloodhounds. The dogs picked up a scent, walked a little way down the hillside, then stopped by the road. That might indicate Ann got into another vehicle, or maybe the rain had damaged the dog's ability to track her, because it had rained in the days after Ann disappeared, potentially washing away footprints and physical evidence. But here's the thing. According to weather data, it hadn't rained for days before Ann left on her trip. It didn't start raining until September 18th, 5 days after she was last seen. So when Ann's car was left there, the ground would have been bone dry. Ann's parents wanted to go to New Mexico to help search for their daughter. But Irving had suffered 2 heart attacks, one the previous year, another shortly before Ann went missing. Babs felt she needed to stay and take care of him, so she sent her brother Lester, a lawyer, in her place. Lester arrived in New Mexico a few days after Ann's car was found. He met with investigators. They told him they hadn't uncovered anything useful. Officer Silva spent days interviewing people in Holman, Tres Ritos, and Mora. He found an employee at the Tres Ritos Lounge, about 7 miles from where the car was found. She remembered seeing a woman who vaguely fit Ann's description asking for change to make a phone call around the time of the disappearance. but she couldn't say with certainty it was Ann. Silva was baffled. He couldn't make sense of it. He later said, "If the car broke down, you would pull it over to the side of the road. Where she left it, unless you were from around here, you wouldn't even know that place was there." Lester made up flyers, photos of Ann, asked anyone with information to call police, offered a $500 reward. Not a single tip came in. Not one. Even Crime Stoppers, which featured her story, didn't receive any information. The case went cold almost immediately. The theories. So what happened to Ann Riffin? There are really only 3 possibilities. Theory 1. She walked away. Maybe Ann decided to start a new life, join a religious group, disappear. Her parents believed this was possible. Ann had letters from the New Testament church inviting her back. Maybe she went to a commune. Officer Silva investigated. He tracked down members of the church, visited religious sects in the area, visited communes. None of them had seen Ann. And here's the thing. When investigators searched Ann's room in Ruidoso, they found she'd taken everything with her. Not a single piece of clothing, not a scrap of paper. She told everyone she'd be back in 2 weeks, but it sure looks like she was planning to leave for good. Theory 2. She got lost and succumbed to the elements. Maybe Ann stopped to paint the landscape, got disoriented, wandered into the wilderness and couldn't find her way back. Extensive searches of the area turned up nothing. No trace of her. Theory 3. Foul play. Maybe Ann picked up a hitchhiker who had bad intentions. Maybe she stopped to help someone with car trouble and was attacked. Maybe she made a friend in the area who did something terrible to her. The problem with this theory, there's no evidence of a crime. No signs of a struggle. No robbery. Nothing taken except her purse and keys. But here's the reality. We have no way of knowing if where Ann's car was found was actually the scene of the crime. Ann Riffin was 33 years old when she vanished. A bright, talented, sensitive woman who spent her life searching for a place where she belonged. She drove west for a new beginning, found work, found a place to stay, made friends, painted the landscape, and then one September afternoon, she drove away and never returned. More than 40 years later, the mystery endures. Her father, Irving, passed away in 1990, never learning what happened to his daughter. Her mother, Babette, passed away in 2006, also never knowing. Her sister, Jane, is still alive, now in her 70s. Not one person who knew and loved Ann has heard a word from her since September 1982. Ann's dental records and DNA are on file. There have been multiple rule-outs over the years of unidentified remains, but no trace of Ann has ever been found. If you have any information about the disappearance of Ann Riffin, please contact the Montclair Police Department at 973-744-1234. You can also email the New Mexico State Police Cold Case Unit. Ann deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers. And somewhere out there, in the vast, unforgiving landscape of New Mexico, those answers are waiting. So that's the story of Ann Riffin.
A woman who vanished in the middle of nowhere, a case with no witnesses, no evidence or answers. Just an abandoned vehicle and over 40 years of questions. If you enjoyed this story, any of our other stories, please hit subscribe, hit that bell notification so whenever a new video from the Cold Case Project comes up, it's right there in front of you. So until next time, It's Tony. See you around.